Hello, good evening to everybody that is with us, joining us live. My name is Renzo Moyano, and I am very excited to be hosting tonight's In Conversation With event. Tonight, we will be talking with the one and only Jewell Parker Rhodes, author of many adult books and more recently, books for middle grade youth. And we have her here today virtually to talk to us about her most recent publication, Paradise on Fire. But to give you guys a little context about who we are Word Up Community Bookshop, Librería Comunitaria, and we are Manhattan's northernmost independent bookshop. We're part of the nonprofit Seven Stories Institute and made our presence known back in 2011 as a small pop-up in the Heights. We're proud to say we're now operating two locations in our community, our main shop and home since 2013, located at 2113 Amsterdam Avenue, and our new pop-up, Recirculation, located at 876 Riverside Drive, home to used books, film, music, a true crate digger's paradise, and a great way to spend 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon. We're operated by a small staff and a large collective of neighborhood residents as volunteers. Since our founding, countless neighbors have been trained as volunteers at Word Up. We practice horizontal leadership, seeking consensus as much as possible. Our goal is to offer the multilingual Uptown community access to literature, event space, support for our local writers and artists of all kinds, talks from your favorite authors, poets, translators, and illustrators, opportunities for community engagement, as well as food security support. We offer in-store shopping, pickup, and online shopping. Every purchase you make at Word Up allows us to continue offering free and low-cost programming for all ages. So that's a little bit about us and what we do in the Uptown, in Uptown Manhattan. As for me, I'm one of the more recent staff members. I've been with Word Up for a year, and it's been an amazing roller coaster ride. But to get to today's event, I am very, very, very excited to introduce Jewell Parker Rhodes, award-winning and best-selling author and educator for both youth and adults. She's the author of 7 books for children, including the New York Times bestseller, Black Brother, Ghost Boys, which has won over 30 honors and awards. Her other books include Towers Falling, the celebrated Louisiana Girls trilogy, which includes Ninth Ward, Sugar, and Bayou Magic, and as well as her most recent book, which we will be discussing today, Paradise on Fire. The driving force behind all of her work is to inspire social justice, equity, and environmental stewardship. Rhodes is the founding artistic director of the Virginia C. Piper Center for Creative Writing and Narrative Studies professor and Virginia C. Piper Endowed Chair at Arizona State University. She was awarded an honorary doctorate of humane letters from Carnegie Mellon University. Born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, she currently lives in Seattle. Everybody, please put your virtual hands together.
Hey, sending you love, everybody. I am so excited to be here, and I want to visit Word Up in person, and I want to see those of you that are on the call and those of you that aren't, that go to Word Up and take part in the Word Up community services. I can't wait to see you, and so maybe I can even hug you in person, because I'm a hugger, so that's what I would want to do.
Awesome. Well, we are. I told you that our doors are open and our arms are open for whenever you get the chance to come to New York City. It would be an honor for us to host you, even for just a minute. But Jewell, I wanted to start us off. You can start us off with initial reading, just to set the mood and start our conversation.
Okay, here it goes. I'm reading from an early part of the novel where Adago is exploring the wilderness with a camp owner, Leo. But this is Adago's thoughts. Grandma Bibi loves talking about the African wild, the national parks, elephants, antelopes, gazelles, mangrove swamps, rainforests, and savannas. Most times I didn't pay much attention. Living in a city, living in New York, I could imagine a differing landscape. Bibi left Nigeria to care for me when my parents died. I didn't understand her loss until now. Bibi must have known I needed this. Leo did too. How'd you know? He knows what I'm asking. His hand touches my shoulder. Intuition. Most folks think the environment they're born into is the only way to live. You never know until you've been somewhere, seen something different. A shriek pierces the air. An eagle. It's the largest, most graceful bird I've ever seen. It soars upward, then glides, then quick, it alters course, flying towards us. A bald eagle, but it's not really bald. It's coming closer, closer. Feathers, white feathers on its head. Female, coming in to look at us, must have a nest. She's huge. Another shriek. The eagle extends its wings, 6, 7, at least 8 feet wide, wider than people are tall. Don't see this in the city. No, I exhale. She's beautiful. This is the first live eagle I've ever seen. Another reason I thought you were a wilderness spirit. Why? A doggo. I Googled it. It's Nigerian, means daughter of an eagle, right? The eagle abruptly turns, heads westward, flaps its wings, rising higher than it dives, hidden by trees. The eagle is a powerful spirit animal in many cultures, German, Mexican, native peoples. Bibi tells me in Nigeria, there used to be a festival in an eagle sanctuary. Most of the eagles have disappeared, so there's no celebration anymore. Everywhere, eagles need protecting from us, from people. The wilderness, rainforests, deserts, Arctic tundra need protecting too. Fuels like coal, oil, and gas make the world hotter. See here, Leo pats a tree trunk. His fingers flick and bark crackles, falls. Drought stresses it, makes it vulnerable to fire. Bark beetles make it worse. Warming causes the baby booms. Used to be one generation of bark beetles. Now it's 2, 3 generations a year. Thousands of beetles laying eggs, spreading bacteria, killing trees. My hands scrape the bark. Spiders scurry between cracks, but it's the black beetles that relentlessly chew. Because of climate change, half of Earth's forests are gone. How can that be? So much beauty lost. How can we keep it, save it? Again, the eagle glides toward us. Welcome home. My heart swells. The morning sun hovers above the horizon. I swear, the eagle tips its wing. I see its eye looking at me.
Thank you, Jewell. Hearing that in your voice is something else. There is so much to unpack there, and before we even do, just wanted to remind everyone who's with us, to please feel free to, whenever at any point you have any questions, there is a section there, a Q&A section. Please feel free to write your questions there, so that it doesn't. You can do it in the chat as well, but chances are it might get lost if there's a lot of conversation. So please try to do it in the Q&A section. And wow, I really, I mean, there are many parts of the book that I think have the power of really getting through to a lot of kids, and not just, I mean, a lot of city kids, and especially Black and brown kids who might not have,
Yeah.
access to, hiking, in upstate New York, or might not have, people in their family who have contributed to kind of opening that world, the natural world up to, kids living in, specifically like in, we take New York City, like the largest city in the US. It speaks, I think, directly to a lot of us kids who grew up in a city and feeling that there was something not necessarily missing, because nature, we are, in it, whether we're in a city or whether we're on a farm. But you know what I mean, like the kind of like wilderness part of nature, the
Yes.
kind of nature that makes you feel like you are a part of something bigger. The
Yes.
kind of nature that makes you feel, because sometimes I think in this kind of, hyper urban world that we live in, we lose track of the whole, right? We kind of get caught up in the human world, and the
Yeah.
people world, very anthropocentric. But when you have experiences like the one that you just beautifully recited to us about Addy's experience on Eagle Ridge, really stepping out of her comfort zone for the first time, and really like being drenched with like nature, in the sense of like, being in the forest, but also having this very personal experience, lived experience with an animal, right?
Yeah.
A member of our biological family, and not just any animal, but an animal that has a very specific connection to her name. And so that's kind of where I wanted to start this
Okay.
conversation. I
Okay.
wanted to start with names,
Ah,
because I think you have a quote, where you say something along the lines of that you believe that words have the power to change things for the better.
yes.
Even when we're talking about a global issue like climate change, you believe that words have that capacity, have that power. I guess before I even go into names, just like what were there any texts or experiences that inspired you, to realize that words was going to be something that you would use as a tool, to
Oh,
kind of
great. Oh,
change
that's
what I see.
Oh, well, that's a really a great question. Um, the words, of course, are connected to, telling stories and narrative. And the idea that I've always felt is that stories make the world better. They create empathy, they create spaces for your imagination. And when I was a little kid, stories just kept my heart alive. But my own personal life was very, very tough. As I grew up in Pittsburgh, I was abandoned as a young child. My grandmother raised me. We were in an impoverished desert-like community, as in desert with lack of trees, lack of nature. And it wasn't until I started writing, which happened when I was a junior in college, when I discovered for the first time ever that Black people wrote books. That shows you the kind of world I was living in and how the world has changed. That was when I ran off and changed my major at college and became an English major. So on a literal level, writing down my story, and I have a novel called My Mother's Child that has never, ever been published because I refused to let it get published. The words had the power to heal me, to get rid of some of the hurt, the sadness. So I felt the change of words in me on a personal level. And then it was just a slip, easy transition to say, I'm now going to take words and I want other children to mirror themselves in my novels, to see that even if somebody bullies them or if somebody's mean to them, that no, they can be like Addy, they can be strong and they can be resilient. They can be the hero of their own adventure story. And I hope by writing those stories where they can see themselves inside a certain narrative might lead them to write then their own stories, to heal whatever wounds they may have, or to celebrate, or to become activists. So it's kind of like a lovely pattern. But the whole human race is about words. and how we put those words to make stories that can encourage activism and change and healing and love.
Well said. Well said. There's words. I completely agree, and this is something that I previously had mentioned to you. But like, I also, personally, I'm a big believer that language is the nucleus of any culture, and
Yes,
it is kind of like one of, there's a lot of keys, right? But it's a big key. I wouldn't say it's like the only key, but it is like a main key to really, I mean, each language is a human. What's to say? There's actually a really someone who described it really well. I don't know if you're familiar. Oh my God,
mhm.
he's an anthropologist. His name is Wade Davis.
Oh,
Um,
yes,
yeah,
famous.
yeah. I one time when I was in college, I was listening to a lot of his talks, and Wade Davis talks about like the ethnosphere. And that word I think is it's very helpful to picture, because we have the biosphere, right, which is
Yes.
the entire sphere of everything that is abiotic and biotic that allows life to continue. But then within that
Mhm.
sphere, because if you just look at our species, that's the ethnosphere, right? And the
Yes.
ethnosphere for him, he says that it is the culmination of all human endeavors, knowledge, wisdom, art, everything
Wow.
that human beings have brought to the table is
Mm.
basically the ethnosphere. And he says that just as how we're seeing the degradation of the biosphere on a large scale, if we focus just on the ethnosphere, we would realize that the ethnosphere, which is a little part of the whole biosphere, that is in danger, and even more danger because it's more vulnerable. Because right, we're
Yes.
dealing just specifically with one species, and just how you can measure the wealth of an ecosystem through its species diversity, you can
Yes.
measure the well-being of the ethnosphere through our language diversity.
Wow. Wow.
Like 40, 50 years ago, but less than a generation ago, it was said that we had over 7,000 human languages, documented, recorded, that we knew
Yes.
that they existed. And now, unfortunately, we have less than half. And the figures are something along the lines of that on average, it looks like we're losing a human language every 2 weeks, which, if we really pay attention to
That's
what that
frightening.
means, it's extremely frightening, because just like how you were saying, like the power of words, and imagine something like climate change, right? That requires a
Words.
global concentrated
Yes.
effort, right? Imagine if we had 7,000 languages.
Yeah.
That means 7,000 ways of interpreting the issues, 7,000 lists of potential solutions, 7,000 ways to approach the problem. That makes us more adaptable as a species. And so
Yes.
when we lose a language and we lose these potential words, it really is a big loss that we don't even know that we're losing, which is almost like the sad part, that
That
there is no climate, there is no like climate change. There should be like a count, like a clock on the news every day, or like a segment,
for
permanent.
words, the language is lost.
Of course, because then I think we
Yes.
would really like pay attention to what that means. And I love taking it back to Addy, taking it back to Adalgo, the fact that like her name, which I think is so beautiful, because like I don't know if you can see here on the Zoom, but I have my first name is Renzo,
Uh-huh.
which my parents got because they saw a soap opera that they really loved. But when I researched my name, Renzo, comes from Lorenzo, which is specifically it's very tied to a place, and that place is a Roman city called Lorendo. If I'm
Wow.
if I'm not pronouncing that incorrectly, but it literally means someone from that town. So it's like, I appreciate the name and I love it. It has a Z in it. It has an O. It starts with an R. It's not that common. But there was a point when I was getting in my adolescence when I really was thinking about it, and I was thinking, like, does this name, like, does it suit me, or does it, and that's why in the Zoom, I have in parentheses my chosen name, which is Hambatu, or Bati for short, which, I mean, interestingly enough, it means frog, because the frog
That
is
is so cool.
yeah, is my animal avatar for a whole number of reasons. But when I was reading the story, and I was seeing, like, wow, Addy, city girl, but in the wilderness for the first time, and having a connection not just to the place but to a specific animal, and
Animal.
that relates to her identity, her name, and her roots.
Yes,
I thought
yes,
super important, because we know that she's from a big city, and we know that most of the story takes place in California, right? It's very place based.
yes,
I love that her Nigerian roots are mentioned. I love
yes,
that in the book the Amazon rainforest is mentioned. I love that it starts locally, but you never forget the whole, right? The big picture.
yes.
And that's
That
something that I appreciate about the book.
Well, thank you so much. And that was intentional, that, climate change is, a global phenomenon. And it's also, city, rural based, forest, wilderness contrast phenomena. But I actually sometimes don't know where I come up with my names. And I had made the decision that I wanted to have Addy to have Nigerian roots. And that was because of the fact that there really was an eagle sanctuary where every year they would have these great festivals. That's true. And now they no longer have those festivals because the eagles don't come. And so I got fascinated with the eagles and learned about, eagles, from Mexico, other cultures, native peoples, that it has meaning. And then of course, as Americans, with a bald eagle. So I also liked how the eagle, that particular animal, sort of connected the world and had a worldwide symbolic meaning for a lot of different people, though they called it different kinds of names. But I also love the idea that the eagle our bird has an aerial perspective. So instead of seeing things from the ground, they can see things from the air, and therefore they can see clearer, more widely. And I think in a very fundamental way, my book is asking people to see the whole, to see the global connections, to see more widely, be above all of our problems and look down, and you will see them even more clearly. This lack of rainforest, the lack of other kinds of forests, the loss of green spaces in our culture. So Adago was also named, daughter of the eagle, by her parents in Nigeria based on her Nigerian roots. And that also fits in with the diaspora, the spiritual of Africans and a lot of other cultures believing that all things have a precious spirit. And so you have this kind of spirit animal, and she does not know, because she's been raised in the city, how much she is guided by that spiritual animal, how much she is in fact an eagle, and that helps her save herself and all of her friends. So that's just that one little name, Adago, and how it worked. For me, it has 5 or 6 different layers of interpretation that make the novel all fit together organically. And that's what a writer tries to achieve, that even one word and what it means, you can make all these other connections in the story, and you hope students will make the same connections when they're reading the book, and they then will, create their change that they want to see in the world.
Have you heard of the maybe I'm assuming you must have come across perchance, but the eagle and condor prophecy? There's this,
No, that one I
yeah,
don't know.
it's a prophecy that basically says that, when it's like symbolically representing the autochthonous indigenous nations of North Abya, which is an indigenous name for the Americas, but from the north, the central, and the south, saying that when we get to a point where we all of the indigenous nations from this entire part of the world, um, synchronize and connect, in what we're all doing in terms of survival, but making making the cultures thrive, preserving them, but not just preserving them, but really like giving it a chance to breathe. And so there's this there's a prophecy that says, you know, that when the nations of the North and the nations and the indigenous nations of the South come together, and when that prophecy is fulfilled, that will that will make it so that it's like a big step towards the kind of collective dream that we all imagine,
Yes.
which is worth fighting for, which is just a healthier planet to live, a more ethical planet to live, one that is filled with empathy, which is something that I really like, because you mentioned empathy, you've mentioned it a lot in other interviews, and you know that like your writing is a way that people can empathize with other people from, you know, with completely
Yes.
different lived experiences, but you'd be surprised to find out how much we have in common. And so talking
Absolutely.
about how things are connected, I just wanted to quickly ask you, what to you is the connection between environmental issues and social justice issues?
Oh, I
How
it sorry, yeah.
intersect, yeah, in your,
It connects for me on a lot of different levels, and I'll start with the personal first. Um, I I lived in a concrete ghetto that had no beauty, rats as dead as, you know, rats, dead rats everywhere, and just awful. And in terms of the horizons that I saw for myself, things that I could do maybe as I grew up and became, you know, an adult, were always very narrowed, because I always lived in this tiny, sort of like hard, you could hurt yourself on the metal, the concrete, the fences world. And I remember I was on my first book tour for Voodoo Dreams, and I came out to Seattle, Washington. I had never seen lakes, rivers, oceans, the Pacific Ocean, mountains, huge, snow-capped, green, and so many variations of green, like, you know, light green, medium green, dark green, lime green, oh, just green. And it just felt as though, boom, something in my soul exploded. And it was like, I felt I could be happy here. I could live here, that the outdoors feel of the town sort of like just opened up a part of my soul. And so for 35 years, I worked to get back to this place, to retire here, finally get back here and be part of this landscape. I think my answer is that so many people of color are living in communities that don't have access to nature, and their psychological health is suffering because of that. That's a known statistic that if you spend 30 minutes a day out in nature, I mean, really nature, you know, that literally it can relieve depression. It can relieve anxiety. In Japan, they have days where they call, you know, forest bathing, where they just go out and feel the forest heal them and bring them at peace. So there's a kind of like connection on a spiritual level, maybe even a biochemical level, between a human being and nature. So as a city kid, or if a city kid, you don't necessarily have access to that. Also because of redlining, where they basically took America and said, white people can live here, but people of color have to live in these sort of concentrated areas. So in fact, you know, there's a wonderful book, and I'm blanking on its name right now, but basically it talks about how the government participated in the decision that say you would have the big high rises where people of color would live, but the suburbs, they were built for white people. And most of those suburbs then prevented Black people or people of color of any nationality from ever moving in. So that also means that there is a sort of city urban based environment that most people of color live in, that is detrimental to their health, your mental health, but also detrimental to their physical health. Because if you're in a neighborhood where you don't have a lot of tree covers, a lot of nature, you're also more subject to heat, that we don't literally have the shade. And as climate change is making our planet hotter and hotter, it is going to be people of color who are going to struggle and not thrive. And the most vulnerable will be babies and the elderly. It is also true because of climate change, because there's not enough tree cover, and particularly in certain urban areas, there are lots of Black people, brown people, you know, yellow people, lots of diverse people live, there's also more pollution because trees take out the CO2, the poison from, our environs, and they reprocess it into healthier air. So does someone in your family have more asthma? Does somebody in your family have heart congestion? Does somebody in your family have a lung disease? All of that can be tied back to, not having nature helping to clear the air in your environment. And the World Health Organization, for the very first time ever, noted that, this was a death because of pollution. And you know who got that on their death certificate? A 9-year-old Black girl in England. So mentally, physically, spiritually, climate change is hurting, communities of color at a record pace. Actually, and I'll stop in a second because I get so fired up, but actually where I live now out in King County, and we're building like a farm further out near the water, but right now in King County, if I went 5 miles further south, I would be in a community that's made up of a lot of refugees, migrants, people of color. And I just read a study showing that particular area, people live, even in nature-bound Washington state, they literally live 8 years less than someone in a predominantly white community, 5, 6, 7 miles away from them. Why? Because their access to nature, even in this very natural, wondrous state, is still limited because of racism and redlining and the lack of initiative that makes, nature a part of their communities, that gives them parks, that plants trees. And it's just a shame. So my novel, Paradise on Fire, is a shout out to all of that injustice. And I think one of the things too is that people of color, if they read this book and say, hey, I can be at one in nature too, that they become invested in the need for change, to demand another right, another civil right, access to clean air, clean water, to nature. And if everyone is caring, like your language is metaphor, if everyone is speaking about it, then we might finally get the change that will make it happen. But to have some people who don't have access to nature not even see it as being significant to them, we're losing their allyship. We're losing the possibility that they can make it better. We're losing that sort of nature explorer who's going to make an important, it's discovery that will help heal all of us. We're losing so much talent. And yet, and I guess this is the last thing, it is true that in terms of our national parks, which the American citizenry owns, that is like those are our parks. Less than 5% of all the national parks are visited by people of color. And it's just horrific. Some of that has to do with cost, access, and also then awareness. So I want kids, if you're on this phone call, ask your mom or dad or friend, Girl Scout troop, Boy Scout troop, ask someone, hey, let's go out and go to nature. Let's hike. Let's stay overnight. Let's make some s'mores. Let's be in a different kind of world and sit around a campfire and tell stories where the world is actually getting better rather than getting worse.
Awesome. And
carried away.
You said something that makes me, I just have one more question before we open it up to the question from the kids from our book club that are currently reading your book. The question that I have for you that you made me sparked is so you are doing an amazing job at reaching people. And so you were first writing for adults, and now it seems like you're really focused on middle grade youth writing. My question is, what led to that switch, to that change, and what is the same about writing for both adults and younger kids, and what is the main, like, a big difference between the two?
Okay, another fantastic question. Actually, once I learned that a Black woman in particular could write books. I saw this book in the library when I was a junior in college, right? Whoa, I want to do that, tell these stories. That changed everything. But at that moment, though, I knew that I wanted to write for children. Writing for children has always been my goal, because when I was a child, things were so bad sometimes that if I didn't have a book or a story to think about, I don't think I really would have thrived. A book could cure loneliness. A book could make me feel better. A book could make me escape, things that were troubled in my environment. So I knew I wanted then not just to have these white kids that I read about and their adventures. I wanted to have kids of color and show other kids of color, here's a story for you, and everybody, but here's a story that mirrors your beauty, your glory, and lets you really know that words can help make things better for you. So I started writing for adults because I didn't think at the time it was good enough to write for children. And I spent over 30 years writing my adult books, waiting to get the call. I can't write a book not unless I get the call. And the day that Hurricane Katrina hit, another environmental disaster, right? I had a book published for adults that same day. And it was such a bittersweet moment because I'd written a lot about New Orleans, and it felt wrong to be celebrating a book when I knew in particular communities of color were going to suffer far worse than any other communities because of Hurricane Katrina and the levees breaking. Now, 2 weeks later, my publisher sent me to New Orleans. Crazy that they would think somebody would buy a book, that a bookstore would even be open. People were like desperate. But I went there and I saw the water lines and I saw the devastation. And I thought to myself, what about the children? How did they survive? What about animals? And all of a sudden, my ninth ward, my story came to me, Lanisha, I've got to write about this. So writing Ninth Ward was my dream to come true, to always write for youth. Youth, you are so special, so smart, so wonderful, so just alive. And I want to write stories where you can see yourself mirrored as resilient and strong and smart. And I want you to always remember that, so that whenever things get hard, open a book, tell a story, find joy in nature and keep going on and on and on, because you can do it. You can make it, and you can make the world better. And in fact, I can't wait for you to grow up. I can't wait and wait and wait, because I would trust my world right now to any middle schooler over the current adults. And that's the truth. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, then.
I love middle schoolers are perfect because it's right at that age where you're going from being the kid you to becoming the young teen, the girl, the boy, to the young woman, the young man. And so you are like, ready to come out of your cocoon, and you're getting ready to soar like a butterfly. And I would like some of my stories to soar with you, to remind you of your glory.
Thank you for that, Jewell. I remember middle school, and I remember that it was I think you're completely right. It was in middle school that I kind of like it seemed like like I was finally aware of like a lot of the ills in our world kind of all came crashing at the same time. So I think, but that was because I guess I wasn't really reading stuff about what was happening with the natural world. I wasn't really paying attention to it. It wasn't on my priority. Like it wasn't part of my priority list until it kind of was so obvious and blatant that it kind of all dawned on me at the same time. And it was really intense. But I imagine that like being I guess like being receptive, or like reading books like yours that are introducing maybe for the first time to a lot of kids the idea of like, this is what's happening in our world, and where's your place in it, where is our place in it. I think having books about that is really, really helpful for kids, so that it's not just like so that they're not just flooded with all of the world's ills all at the same time, but it's something that can be digestible, and where they can feel like it's not over.
Yes.
Like being nihilistic or just crossing your arms and waiting to see what happens is not the way to go. And I think when kids are able to digest these things in these books, I think it becomes more, like more navigable, something that they can actually understand, but not become completely nihilistic or depressed, because
Yes.
that can happen when we're talking about these
Yes.
things.
Thank you
So
so much. That's great. I do want to add, though I write about serious subjects, regarding the environment and regarding social justice, I center the experience of boys and girls of color, and also very often animals like an eagle or a dog or a cat. That's all important to me. But my stories will always get you through to the other side, that there is always uplift. And I think that comes from the fact that though I made it sound as though my times were hard when I was young, they were really hard. But I also had a grandmother like Grandma Bibi. And in all my stories, you'll see a reference to an elder, a Black woman who sheds love and gives love to her grandchild. And that's what my grandmother did for me. And now I'm a grandmother trying to share and give love. But she would tell me, and it's in ninth ward, I quote this, she would say, Jewel child, um, well, she would say, always, eventually, the universe shines down with love. So she gave me the seed that to know that times can get hard, but we can make it better. And so she gave me hope. She also said, Jewel child, there's nobody in the world better than you, and you're no better than anybody else. We're all a mixed blood stew, which also made me feel at a very young age that I was connected to every human being on this planet just by my sheer humanity. And so I can embrace in my stories Asians, Native, Indigenous peoples, Black, Hispanic peoples, white peoples, everyone. And my stories will take you to a place where you, as a child of color, thrive. You are the hero. And most hero stories, like Gary Paulson's Hatchet, are about white boys' experience. There are very few books that talk about, a Black girl or a brown girl surviving, kind of surviving nature. So that was why it was also important to me. Hey, let's put Addy front and center, because she's got the smarts, the intuition, the empathy. She's got everything, and she's going to be the hero. So that's what you'll get from a Jewell Parker Rhodes book.
I love it. I love it. I love, because that's what we need. We need that inspiration, and we need to hear about people that are successfully like seeing things through. Just so that kids understand that yes, like this is possible. Just like Addy was able to go
Yes.
from the city and become kind of like have this whole transformation in place in this forest with people that she didn't really know, but through shared experience, the experience itself, has made them like just like family. And I think that
Yes. Yes.
mentioned
Yes.
book, it's an experience that she will never, and everyone else who is a part of that will never ever
Never
forget.
forget. Yes.
Exactly.
It changes the course of Addie's life. It changes the fact that, what she's going to study in college. She now comes every summer and she learns new skills that she didn't know she had. Even when you're in school, they might have a test where they say, how good is your English? How good is your math? But there are also experiential tests. How good are you at dealing out in the real world? Dealing with nature, dealing with elevation, being able to read maps. And that's a whole area of another intelligence that our schools don't even consider. And yet, my husband likes to always say, we're going to have a zombie apocalypse one day. The zombies are going to come and get us, right? And he's really into experiential stuff. So he's ready. He knows all about how to survive in the wild. And he inspires me how to take care of business and protect this community. Now, obviously, the zombies aren't going to come, but learning that and then teaching me and our kids that we actually had a disaster. We had an earthquake that we lived through. And there are all kinds of tons of skills that are experiential related to, natural disasters that we had to use in order to survive. How to deal with fire, how to get clean water, how to cook without electricity. So it's a good thing to know. It's good experience. It makes you stronger and it makes you more unafraid of going anywhere. I can do a lot more stuff than I thought I could.
Yeah.
Like Renzo, go to the Amazon rainforest.
I mean, while it's still there, because it is shrinking every year because of all of the, the different industries that make their way and that have, been there for decades, including oil drilling, cattle ranching,
Yes,
monoculture, it's a long list. Yeah,
absolutely.
like because like we get all of these really intense like stories about what's happening. Stories like this are what we need to really fight against. And I guess I'm using the word nihilism a lot because like I just saw I recently saw Everything Everywhere All at Once where it's like it's
Yes.
a movie that very much deals with like nihilism. But yeah, I think that it's really like nihilism is really real, and it can stifle us, and it can make us freeze. But I really love that like you deal with characters who are in positions where either because they don't have a choice, or they do have a choice, and they see the importance and have a whole priority shift because of the experiences that they're having. It's really beautiful to see characters in stories that choose to not take the easiest path, but maybe take the path less
Yeah.
traveled. Like
Yes.
Addie's
Yes.
decisions, and her path is not an easy one, but she
No,
did it, and she's super brave and
she
admirable
survived.
for that. And so basically, I want to now just give you bring in some of the kids to ask you questions, but just for context and for everybody else who's watching us, the whole reason why we have Jewell Parker Rhodes here with us in this virtual Word Up event is because we host a program called the Earth Defenders Initiative. And the idea behind that is, well, it's multifaceted, but the idea is to help kids develop their ecological literacy, by learning of the natural and indigenous history of our uptown community. So by, complementing the reading, writing, group discussions with natural areas exploration and skill learning, we hope to help mold, adaptable, critical thinkers ready to act as the next generation of Earth defenders. So that is the goal of the program. And so I would love to have one of our Earth defenders, Rue, if you're there, if you're
Rude.
in, if you're in the sphere,
Hi, Rude.
please, I would love for you, if you can, if your cameras working, if all it's good,
I
for you
see the
to ask
name.
one of your amazing questions to Jewell Parker Rose, because I know you're really excited.
What do you hope the youth will do for the climate movement?
Oh, what do I think the youth will do? I think, well,
What do you
I think
hope?
we
I think
hope, well, yes, I think young people are going to, push more for less dependence on, oil and coal, that we might in fact get more like electric cars, more things that don't emit gases. I also think, but I guess it's on so many levels. You can see that that's one level. That's sort of like there's a big scientific community that can think of scientific ways to maybe help us slow down climate change or to better respond to climate change. Then there might be a whole group of people who are more experiential, as in they become part of a team that like helps clear the forest or helps plant trees. And the other day I saw on TV that for a year, these divers picked up the plastic and all the gunk that was at the bottom of Lake Tahoe. And they brought up like apparently 7 billion tons of trash that had built up over 40 years. So I think also I see kids growing up and becoming part of the world, or even as kids helping to keep the world clean. I also see kids becoming educators, telling their parents why it's so important that if they want their kids or their grandkids one day to have clean air to breathe, hey, we need to plant a tree or we need to start recycling. So there's all kinds of ways to do it, and we need every single one of them. Or even if you're an artist and you're writing a book like I've done, you can do that and advocate climate change, or write poems, or create art showing, what it means to have a fig from a tree growing and pushing up into the earth. So literally, there's so much that kids can do. All you need to do is just start being you and thinking about it. And what often happens is a lot of times in schools or talking with adults, they talk about everything else except climate change, So maybe, a kid can say, why don't we talk about that and bring it front and center? Because kids then can start finding the pathways they want to help make our planet stronger and richer and better in terms of environmental activism. I believe in you.
You're very well worded.
Huh?
You're very well worded.
Oh, thank you very much. Also I have the problem, Rue, that I'm also a professor. So I talk a lot. And it's a good thing I write too, because otherwise I think I would be talking all the time and never stop, But I have got to tell you that the reading helped me enormously, but I am the first person in my family to go to college, literally. So in terms of being a wordsmith, my grandmother was a wordsmith because she told great cultural stories, but the words that she sometimes used or the stories that she told, a lot of the world saw that as not being good enough. So one of the reasons that I'm writing now is that I'm trying to get the voice sometimes of my grandmother of, communities of color speaking and talking and being in the world, because I want to show that. But it is interesting that I had to learn tons and tons about standard English, become a professor in standard English. But you'll notice in my book, there are sentences that are not complete, that there are fragments, they're like clip, sometimes fast dialogue. So I'm trying to bring my cultural linguistic sense with also standard English linguistic sense and make a new kind of book that can be read that kids can relate to in a different kind of way. Does that make any sense, Rue?
I'm excited to meet you. I really love reading your writing.
Oh, thank you very, very much. And we'll have to, I will talk to Word Up. I'll have to get some more books for you guys so you can go in there and get some as gifts for me, because you make my life better. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rue. Next,
Rue.
Angelica.
Angelica.
One of my questions was that how young were you when the 2018 fire happened? How did it affect you?
Oh, you mean the actual Paradise on Fire fire that happened in Southern California?
Yes.
Well, yes. Well, let's see. It was 4 years ago. So I would have been 64. That's how I'm old. I'm 68 right now. Anyway, I'm 68 and very young at heart. So it happened, not too long ago, before COVID. And then while I was writing Paradise on Fire, there were other forest fires that happened in Northern California and happened in Oregon, which the smoke blew up here. And actually outside my window, there's a week where I couldn't see anything. It was just like smoke. You couldn't see in front of your feet. It was so thick with smoke. And that's the really horrific thing about wildfires too, and why we've got to prevent them, but they're going to happen more and more frequently because of drought and climate change. But the smoke from a wildfire travels. So actually there was a fire in Colorado where the fire's pollution, it has particulates in it, gases, chemicals, that actually made it as far as the East Coast. There were horrific fires in Australia in this past decade. And from Australia, that's at the bottom of the map or at the bottom of the globe, the pollution actually made it as far as London, which is far north on the globe. So I'm finding that a lot of kids on the East Coast don't think too much about wildfires. You know, that's California, that's Colorado, you know, but the pollution is affecting our entire planet. The gases are affecting our entire planet, and every tree we lose, it's like losing like a piece of our planet's lungs. And so one day, literally, our planet won't be able to breathe, and that will be devastating for life. So I experienced that because I had air filters on in the house, trying to get rid of the pollution, and literally we've moved far north and we still can't get away from it. You know, that the air quality is still not what it ought to be because the West is such a hotbed for pollution and smoke. So it is personal. Yeah, it is personal. I don't want anybody to have asthma. I don't want anybody to have trouble breathing. I don't want anybody to have their lungs compromised. I want you kids especially to be strong and healthy, always. That's what us as grown-ups owe you. And part of that then is helping make sure that the planet stays healthy enough so you can be your most healthy.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for the really good question.
You guys are terrific.
Oh man, no, they each made a list, and is so many good questions. I was like, if we only had time for all of them.
Do we have time for another question or two?
Yeah, if you have, we can definitely do another question.
Yes,
see.
I would love to.
Awesome. Let's see. Next up here. Well, I see a so-called Philip. Well, I know
Philip.
that's not. That's probably their. That's their parent. That's their dad's name.
Okay, that's a dad's name.
Yeah, it's for the dad's Zoom. But there we go.
There's Anna. Hi, Anna. How are you?
Hi, Anna.
Good.
Anna, yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Do you have a question?
I forgot my question.
Oh, there was
I do that all the time.
there was yeah, they all it's great. Yeah, there were so many questions to choose from, and we like tried to whittle it down and edit a whole bunch of them. But Anna, actually, I remember Anna had asked a question originally that we were trying to edit to try to word it better. But basically, if I remember correctly, it was or one of them was like, if there was one particular environmental issue out of the many that we currently face with climate change, but if there was one that you would love to see resolved in your lifetime, what would that one be?
Anna, was that your question? Wow. Oh, nobody has ever asked me that question. And see, it takes a kid to ask me that question to get me to really start thinking about it. And I think that's like, whoa, the one. If I don't know if we could, I would like to stop the Arctic and Antarctica. I would stop them from melting. That as they're melting and as there are big, miles long icebergs that are falling and melting, it's causing rising seawaters. And rising seawater is actually threatening some island nations. Like literally, they're not going to exist. It's already threatening, our coastal communities in the United States and all over the world. And it's also having an effect on the species life, that are actually in the waters themselves, because the temperature changes are creating, odd conditions. And some species and some of the food groups that they rely upon are not going to be in existence anymore. And just maybe 2 days ago, I was looking at a program that would take me to Antarctica, right? So cold, to see in particular the emperor penguins. That is the only place in the world where they live. And this is a tour where you work with emperor penguin scientists, and you talk collectively about, what will it mean to lose the space? What will it mean to animal life? What will it mean to human life? What will it mean to plant life? next spring too, I'm actually going to the Galapagos. And I hope to learn more about how, climate change is affecting them. But I'm pretty sure that the rising sea waters would still be affecting or endangering the land mass that the Galapagos Islands, rest on. So I would think, yeah, stopping the Arctic and the Antarctica from melting.
That's a big one. That's a
Yeah,
good
it's
one.
big. Yeah, it's a
That's a
big
good
one. Thank you,
Yeah.
Anna, for that great question.
Thank,
Whoa. See,
thank you.
maybe my body and my mind knew I was concerned about that because I made the Ecuador trip and I'm asked for some information for the Antarctica trip. But it wasn't until you asked the question, till you posed the question, though Renzo gave it to me, that it helped me put in perspective. I think, oh, that must have been what I really cared about all along too. But I just had never talked about it because nobody had asked me the question. But I think I'm onto something. I'm knowing something a little bit more about myself because of you. Totally cool. I told you you kids were wonderful. Totally cool.
Oh my God. Yeah. Thank you to all of the Earth defenders who were able to ask their questions. I know we had so many more. We had, and we had so many more. We had one of them was like, what is do all the other characters have like an animal avatar, animal spirit that we don't know about? We had
Yes.
questions. Yeah, we had so many
One
questions.
gets into reptiles a whole lot. One gets into reptiles a whole lot. Okay. Here, give me some of the lightning questions fast, Renzo. Let's see if we can go through some of them quick.
I think it would be a good one. Like what is everyone else's animal in the
I think that
story?
would be really good. I didn't think of the animals so much. I think actually it's who is it when they start doing it? It's Kelvin. No, it's not Kelvin. It's not Jay. It's Deshaun. I think Deshaun. Deshaun is the one who does, he sings to himself. He's the big guy, but he's like kind of like Deshaun is the one. Anything having to do with snakes, and actually, climate change affects snakes, and it's hurting their lifespans. So I did have in my mind that Deshaun, who never knew a snake other than maybe the ones he saw, in his community in Philly or wherever, or New Jersey, that now he's like maybe off to become a zoologist. He may work in a zoo or talk about climate change and taking care of snakes. Why? Oh, because he went somewhere different and saw and felt and did new things. So if you ever get asked to do something new and exciting and adventuresome, don't be shy, even if you feel like it, which I do most of the time. Do it anyway, because it makes your world bigger. And you may find that you fell in love with something that you had no idea that you would fall in love with because you had never seen it.
Jewel, you know what's crazy? When we were, what's really funny is when we were reading the book, I actually sprained my ankle right before we got to that part. And so when we were reading, how Deshaun sprained his ankle while they were running away from the fire, I was just like, talk about empathy. I was really feeling it.
Yes, yes, you're really feeling it. Yes, yes.
And I was like, how that's so hard. He just got a sprain and he has to run away from a fire. I was just like, oh my, like it got my heart pumping. I was like, oh my God, like what's gonna happen?
And Deshaun really, and he really makes it, and so he gathers that courage. I don't think that you guys have finished Escape.
We're almost, actually, no, we did. No, you're right. We're on Escape.
Yeah, so it gets pretty hairy for them. And just so you know, and I know there must be some boy Earth defenders, and I love boys and girls. I'm a mama to a boy and a girl. But another thing about the survival literature that's taught in America that has basically white boys surviving, they usually survive on their own, like I did it all by myself.
That's true.
It seemed to me, in terms of communities of color and in terms of girls, that Addy is the way to do it. That Addy, it's not all about her. It's about her community, her new family of friends, and all of the friends contributing to step up as they could in order to make sure they all survive. So that's very unusual. And I just say, well, that just what goes to show you what a girl of color would do. You know, a girl would do, a girl of color would do. She would make sure everybody, if she could, was all right.
No, those are the leaders, and that's the kind of collective thinking and action we need. We need that. We need people. We need to basically be there for each other. We need to have each other's backs.
Absolutely.
Very practically and pragmatically, but also like just in this long, because this is everyone. We're all like on our own paths, and we all want to contribute in our own way. And just knowing that we have a support, a community full of support, I think is the fuel that we need to like
makes everything better. Yeah.
Not alone, even though sometimes it might feel that way. We really are not alone. And I can just imagine all the other people in previous generations, like my ancestors, but also like everyone else's ancestors. And I'm imagining like all of the generations of warriors and leaders and people that really try to do as much as they can to make it easier and make a pathway for the rest of us to continue the work. And so
absolutely,
thank you, Jewell, for continuing the work in the way that you do. We are also trying to do what we can at the bookshop with the Earth Defenders program and all the things that we're trying to do, because it's not just the book club, but there's a big community service aspect about it as well. We are actually, not just reading about it and talking about it, but we're going out there to our parks and our natural areas and really becoming community partners to a lot of the projects that are happening there, helping clean it up, helping rejuvenate it, reinvigorate it, and basically providing an ecological classroom.
That's beautiful. It is so beautiful. Renzo,
Jewell,
I don't know if you mind if I can just take a few more minutes and read the start of the Big Escape. Okay. All right. And so young people, this is for you. Remember, this is graduation camp and everybody's asleep and Addy wakes up. Fire, I scream. I lift the tent's flap. Nessa, get up, fire. I rush to each of the tents yelling. Everyone's confused, groggy, but not Jay. Alert, he moves, shaking to Sean. Get up, man. Jamie wakes, blinking like I'm crazy. What are you talking about? Dylan rushes out, staring west. He curses. Soon everyone is outside screaming, yelling. The mountain range behind us is aglow. There are popping bursts like gunshots or fireworks. Dry trees, says Jamie awed. I've read this. They explode, spread sparks. New fires, adds Jay emphatic. Pop, pop, pop. Dozens of new fires starkly lit against the darkened sky. Nessa crying grips my hand. We're all awestruck, watching the flames reach higher into the sky, creating snake-like trails. Fire across the ridge, down the mountainside, spreading inland, tree by tree, burning like massive candles, pop, pop, popping and falling, striking more trees, burning ground cover, eating the landscape alive. So it begins.
So it begins. Well, thank you, Jewell, for lighting the fire. Might be a better way to say that, but thank you for lighting the fire or keeping it alive, not just in yourself, but in all of us. I think I'm not alone in saying that the kinds of stories that you're telling are crucial for this time. They're of the time, they're for right now. And I think I'm happy that I found the book, and I'm happy that I was able to incorporate it into the program, and it was able to bring you here with us and talk to us. And
thank you very much. And Word Up and Renzo, I will I think go to your website. You have a website, right? All right, and I'm gonna make a gift card so that you can give our young people who are on the Zoom today, some more of my books if they so choose. So look for that. And kids, I can't wait to meet you one day. And just know that I'm so, so proud of you. And this is the best time in my whole life. I finally got to write for you guys, and I am honored by it, and I am humbled by it. And if any of you ever decide to grow up and you want to write stories too, call me and let me help. Okay. Bye.
Deal.
Be
Deal.
blessed.
Thank
Bye.
you, so much, Jewel. Thank you so much. And
Thank
thank
you
you
so
for
much.
everyone who was with us. Thank you so much for attending the event. Please consider joining us as a sustaining member, signing up for our mailing list. We don't overdo it. We won't flood your emails, we promise. Or following us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And so you can follow, like, share, and tag us at Word Up Books. Thank you again to everyone who attended.
Bye.
Special thank you to Jewel. Jewel, we'll be in
Bye,
touch.
all. Thank you. We will be in touch. Happy summer reading, everyone. Bye-bye.
Happy Friday the 13th.
Oh, no. Okay. Goodbye.